Hello, how are you? I'm so glad you're here. Today, I thought we'd talk a wee bit about some of the other symptoms that we can experience other than just pain. Pain obviously is a very important topic, and that's, it does get a lot of attention, rightly so. And most of the literature and research around the influence of the brain on the body is in relation to pain and chronic pain, obviously in particular. But certainly in my experience and in speaking with other professionals and people, more and more, we're hearing about all the other symptoms that people can also experience. And these symptoms often don't get the same sort of publicity as pain. And as such, people who are experiencing them might not realise that this same approach can also apply to these other symptoms. And therefore, they're maybe missing out on the opportunity to use these approaches to help their symptoms. So I suppose maybe the next most kind of common one you might have heard of after chronic pain, is maybe things like chronic fatigue or ME, that type of idea. And I suppose aspects of other painful conditions like fibromyalgia, for example, which along with pain often has elements of fatigue and sort of the fibrofog, the sort of confusion, the fogginess in the brain that people often report as well. And I know certainly I had it as well. So that's quite a common symptom, is this sort of the fatigue element. And like I said, that can go along with lots of other painful conditions as well, or can present on its own. So, say fatigue is something. Now, we're not talking here about fatigue in relation to you've had a really busy week or you've decided to go to the gym every night and you haven't been for a year. We're not talking about that kind of fatigue. We're talking about the kind of, again, this sort of chronic, ongoing fatigue that is not related to activity levels. So that isn't related to the normal levels of tiredness or fatigue that you would expect. Anyone would expect to experience at different times. We're talking about the ongoing fatigue that isn't resolved with rest and sleep and that kind of thing. So that's the kind of the defining characteristic of the more sort of chronic fatigue type problems, is that it doesn't resolve with rest, whereas other tiredness you would expect to improve if you had a good rest. So that's a symptom that a lot of people experience. I mean, we know fibromyalgia is, a very widespread problem. Lots of people experience it. Fatigue is often a major component of that. And then things like chronic fatigue, ME, and things like long COVID now as well. There's increasing research into showing that long COVID is a neuroplastic problem as well, along with other things that we've talked about like fibromyalgia and ME. And we're talking here about long COVID in the sense of the fatigue and the aching and all that kind of thing, not talking about actual organ damage. That's always a different thing. If people have organ damage as a result of COVID relating to their respiratory system or their heart or whatever, that's obviously different. We're talking here about the sort of long COVID symptoms, which is your fatigue, your achiness, your foggy brain, all that kind of type of things, which again, as you can see, sits quite similarly with the chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia sort of symptoms as well. So already they're just talking about three sort of different conditions, if you like. You can see the similarities there, and one of which is the fatigue element. And you wonder, well, why would your brain produce fatigue? What's the benefit of that? But it makes it the same about pain. Why does it produce pain? And as we've talked about before, your brain's job is always to keep you safe, and it will do whatever it needs to do to keep you safe from whatever it perceives as being dangerous. And as we said before, in relation to pain, pain will be produced to keep you safe. It's either to distract you from something else, to distract you from emotional or stressful turmoil, or to prevent you having to go and deal with whatever it is that's going on. And the same goes for fatigue. If you think in some ways, it actually takes it to another level again. If you are so fatigued, if you have so little energy, if you have, are struggling to get out of your bed, well, there's really not anywhere much safer, is there? From your brain's point of view, you can't get much safer than under that duvet. You're in your bed, You're away from the world. You don't have to face whatever the stress is that's out there, and it is doing its job of keeping you safe. Now, again, just to reiterate, it's not in any way saying that it is made up. It is not in any way saying that it is put on. It is a physical manifestation of the stress. So it's not you putting on or being at it, or it's not something you're in control of or willfully doing. But it is another example of how the brain will intervene and come up with different symptoms to protect you. And as we said before, that's ultimately its job, is to keep you safe and protect you. And you can see how, as I say, fatigue is actually taking things even more so than pain. It's really going to rein you in. You know, pain's going to stop you doing something, yes, but fatigue, you know, what you do if you feel absolutely fatigued, well, you're saying, well, I can't physically get out of the house. I can't physically go to my work. I can't physically do this. I can't physically deal with the children. I can't physically, and you can't think about anything else. Your brain, getting the brain fog that often goes along with fatigue, is so intense that it stops you actually being able to think about things very clearly either. So you can see how if we keep harking back to the role of the brain to keep you safe, you can see why fatigue in itself is a really useful mechanism for the brain to do that. It's a really useful way of it doing its job of keeping you safe. But just like chronic pain, or persistent pain, it's exactly the same with fatigue and brain fog and these type of associated problems that we're talking about here. The same approaches work by helping your brain feel safe, by helping it come down from that state of alert, from it perceiving that there is something to be fearful of, exploring what's actually going on. You can absolutely resolve these symptoms as well. Just in the way we can with persistent pain, so too with chronic fatigue, the fatigue associated with fibromyalgia, the fatigue associated with long COVID, and any other conditions. Sometimes just fatigue in itself, you know, without a diagnosis of these other issues, other things. But the same approach works. It's the same mechanism. Your brain's doing the same thing. It's just doing it in a slightly different way. And often fatigue will go along with persistent pain as well. You know, pain itself can cause fatigue too. So often the two will go together, but sometimes people have fatigue without the pain. So it's just to let you know that if you are somebody, or you know of somebody that's experiencing fatigue to that degree, if they have a diagnosis of one of these conditions, or even if they don't, but if it's fatigue as opposed to tiredness because you're a bit busy, but actual fatigue that prevents you from doing things, that isn't associated with a serious pathology like cancer or multiple sclerosis or motor neuron, obviously it's always we exclude these things. These are different things. That's medical conditions. That's a different situation. But for things like ME, fibromyalgia, and long COVID, the fatigue associated with those kind of conditions is absolutely amenable to the same approach as we take with persistent pain. So by using this brain retraining approach, we can absolutely overcome these problems as well. And although a lot of the literature and a lot of the things we write about and talk about is all talks about pain, and that can mean people don't think, oh, that's not applicable for me. It absolutely is. Okay, so that's a wee bit about fatigue. And I think it might be worth doing another video maybe on some other symptoms that people experience that we can also use the same approach to help with. Because as I say, there's a lot around about the pain and a lot around about pain work and all that kind of thing. But actually it's recognising there's a lot of other conditions that we can help with too, using the same sort of approach. Okay, I'll leave you for now, but as always, if there's anything that brings up for you, feel free to drop me a message. I'd love to hear from you. Okay, take care. Bye for now.